a therapist or working in a community-based organization where you can really apply the concepts of and ideas of trauma-informed care and strengths-based therapies and interventions in your programming and activities. So I'm going to use the term patient families. I'm trying to break away from using the term clients as it feels a little bit sterile. So just, I hope you'll partner with me in this journey and this discussion today. A quick review of a little bit about CYW. As many of you know, we were founded in 2012 by Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, who we are delighted and so proud of, who is serving currently as the Surgeon General of the state of California, the first, and I'll say the foremost. The Center for Youth Wellness was really brought to life out of Nadine's deep desire to lead the conversation on addressing adverse childhood experiences and toxic stress through screening interventions and then working actively to build resilience. Today and for many years, the Center for Youth Wellness works with the Bayview Hunters Point community and in conjunction and collaboration with Bayview Child Health Center to provide multifaceted programming, direct patient counseling, as well as other community-based services. And our model at CYW in the recent years has shifted away from just screening and providing services, to really focusing on an ecosystem model where we work with providers and help train them to screen and implement trauma-informed care, and then help them to think about engaging the family in a community care plan, and what education and post-treatment resources may be needed, and also working within the community to provide direct engagement and educational campaigns that would further drive and facilitate policy and advocacy change. We're very excited about this model and feel that it fits the work we do very well. Just a little bit about me. I'm a nurse and a social worker. I've been with CYW since 2016. Being a nurse and a social worker, I don't feel like I know what I want to be when I grow up. And I'm very happy to be the mother of a beautiful 15-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old puppy. And I'm coming to you from Dallas, Texas today. So I want to do the brief overview of ACEs science and toxic stress just to ground us in why this work is so important and why the strengths-based perspective of care is an excellent fit within healing from ACEs and toxic stress. So if you will remember the original Onda and Folletti study done or published in 1997, identified 10 core ACEs that were directly correlated with long-term health outcomes that were negative. Now, the study was done in white adult males primarily, but these core ACEs have been studied, and there's a clear correlation in all of us when we have experienced these 10 items. So with regard to abuse, it includes physical, emotional, and sexual, neglect, both physical and emotional, and items of household instability, which in the original study included mental illness, incarcerated relatives, mothers treated violently. We now refer to that as domestic or partner abuse, substance abuse in the household, and originally divorce, which we now refer to as parental separation or relational volatility. In addition to the 10 core ACEs, we have also recognized that there are additional adversities that are experienced on the community level. I think it's painfully obvious, and we've had multiple reminders of the systems of discrimination and racial violence that we have seen in the media that has occurred for many years, but we have such vivid and painful reminders of the lack of safety for our Black and Brown communities, and the systemic racism that they experience. In addition, an adverse community environment we're all living with right now is the COVID pandemic. These things, along with the other items that are represented here, provide an additional set of ACEs that really should be addressed and considered when working with patients and families. Um, and when we look at the 10 leading causes of death in the United States, we know that having 4 or more ACEs are directly correlated with 7 of those 10 items. And so you can see in this diagram with the odds ratios that if you've had 4 or more ACEs, you're 2 times as likely to die from heart disease than the general US population. 11 times more likely to die from Alzheimer's, and 30 times more likely to die from suicide. And when you take all of these direct correlations into consideration, without intervention, there can be a 20-year difference in life expectancy for those individuals who have experienced 4 or more ACEs than those who haven't. And so we know that the biological mechanism of toxic stress is very real. And so we like to think about and consider how the chronic dysregulation of the neuroendocrine and immune system can lead to epigenetic and systems changes that may impact patients and families in very clinical ways, so that we may be referred to them. If you're a medical provider, you may see them in your clinic. If you're a behavioral health provider, you may be getting referrals. And if you're a community worker, you may just see families or individuals acting out or struggling with their coping. And so I think it's important for us to consider how chronic stress triggers our cortisol levels and impacts a whole cascade of hormones and stress regulating hormones that do create chronic dysregulation. And now I like to remember, and I think it's critical so that we can remain hopeful, that this is not the end of the story. And the wonderful news is that we have hope in that not everyone experiences negative events in the same way. And there are many factors that go into that, but part of it is our own individual resilience, our DNA, and a part of it, and a good important part of it, something that we can augment and change, are those positive supports. With regard to those positive supports and those factors that build resilience and buffer trauma, we at the Center for Youth Wellness call those the domains of wellness. And these are 7 items that we have researched and have evidence-based findings that directly correlate to buffering stress and building resilience. And these 7 items include, and most importantly, the most effective one is building and having supportive relationships in your life. In addition to that, eating healthy, having good sleep hygiene and good sleep, using movement or exercise, practicing mindfulness, being attuned or supporting your own mental health, and spending time in nature. And before we jump into the core curriculum, I just want to share this quote from Ryan North that I feel like is so key to our understanding of how patients and families and individuals across the globe react to trauma. This thought that our brains are wired for connection, but trauma rewires them for protection. So anything that we can do to help patients open up and experience healing is a critically important thing. And just for a moment, I want to bring in the concept of trauma-informed therapy or trauma-informed care, and and have you think about the key principles as we dive in deeper to strengths-based care. So I would certainly say strengths-based care can exist without trauma-informed care and vice versa. However, the most healing environment that a patient or family can exist in is a place where those two things are alive and well and coexisting. And so, if you think about the key principles of trauma-informed care, we know that it's critical that we recognize the role that trauma has played in a person's experience, and that is really essential to us being able to heal the toxic stress or trauma in someone's life. It also must recognize that the nature of trauma and understanding the impact is the beginning of where hope lies. And so trauma informed care is really built on that holistic view of offering safety and compassion. And that environment helps us to be. If you think about the intersection of trauma informed care and based care, it's really this beautiful path where the goal is to walk with the patient family to understand what has happened and how to incorporate those experiences into a new sense of wholeness. Acceptance is as not bad, but something that is. It is what happened. And how can we build upon those events and experiences to empower and strengthen one another? This focused healing really should bring increased self-care and compassion. It should look to address and affect emotional and self-regulation. It should help an individual their resources and actually help them to identify support systems within themselves and support systems outside of themselves to help build healthier relationships um, and secure attachments, and then actively build upon resilience. Again, looking at those domains of wellness and building and incorporating those into self-care. The principles of strengths-based care really focus on what is working. We really ask and hope to engage the patient families on the wisdom that they've experienced in their lives and how their efforts to persevere have worked and strengthened them in spite of their challenges. It helps to recognize, again, what has worked well in the past and build upon those to foster resilience and better coping. A few things to consider with regard to how the patient might be feeling or what they have experienced in the past as you dive into implementing strengths-based interventions or care within your therapeutic setting or your programming. And I know that all of you probably have worked with patients or families that really recall all the negative words that have been used to describe them. Certainly, this type of labeling has been very detrimental to patients and families and individuals that we may have encountered. And so we need to, with that trauma informed have on our mindset, the concept of recognition is again critically important. So recognizing that they are not simply misbehaving, but they are likely overwhelmed with stress. And so without role models or having limited support or not knowing how to get help they need. This acting out or having behaviors that present as less than cooperative may be the only way they can actually say, I need help. And so again, really recognizing that this is not misbehaving, and it is coping that has been being utilized, and there are probably even some positive aspects of some of that coping. There may be some underlying strengths about that coping that might be tweaked or reframed and be useful as they continue to work on themselves and building more resilience. The strengths-based approach really accepts a person as it is. And so it really is geared towards meeting families where they are, and recognizing the huge range of emotional states and feelings that unhealed trauma creates. It's like a scab on our heart or our soul that has been untreated and unhealed. And it can easily be pricked by other situations, people, sounds, events in the media that disrupt us and create a surge in those emotional states that we may not even realize have a root in a deep trauma. But we oftentimes can realize, oh, I had a really big reaction to that. And so helping a family dig in or an individual dig in to those emotional states and feelings creates that opportunity to really have discussions that do not focus on what is wrong with you, but instead, what has happened to you? How did you survive that? What did you do to cope with that? And it really affirms that if you pursued some ineffective coping, that behavior really makes sense given what has happened to you. But how can we partner now to focus on more active coping? And many of the strengths that you have portrayed and have within you that can help strengthen you and bolster your self-care and resilience building as we move forward. Some of the benefits of strengths-based care are that they really focus on safety. And this is critically important as if we are to create an environment where discussion about unhealed trauma is going to occur, safety has to be first and foremost. And so when you are participating in strengths-based care and trauma-informed therapy, you should really be feeling not only safe physically, but safe emotionally. And an environment should be created where that healing can be launched and pursued. There's a strong incorporation of self-care and strengths-based therapy, as well as boundaries, of grounding and resourcing in just a moment. Strengths-based care really seeks to understand coping skills, again, how you survived your experiences, and helps to build on new, healthy coping skills. It's really critical and important that strengths-based care moves at the pace of the patient or your family or your individual. And it's built upon mutual collaboration and keeps a family member or a patient within a window of tolerance for those strong emotions that may be associated with the trauma they've experienced. So there's a lot of checking in and awareness, again, to triggers that may be related to those traumatic experiences. And part of that work is an important discovery exercise as you work to build understanding about the emotional responses so that you can create action plans that help the individual move towards resilience and coping when those emotions and maybe even flooding of imagery come up related to that trauma. Again, key features of strengths-based care should really focus on respect, building comfort, slowly building a relationship, and that deep, deep sense of safety, compassion, warmth, and kindness. Actually, things that we all want really within any of the meaningful interactions we have with individuals, no matter how we are interacting or showing up or facing community members, friends, or family. I want to talk a little bit more, or a little bit more in depth about grounding and resourcing. So this is a strengths-based and trauma-informed approach. And really, again, you can't really launch into meaningful grounding and resourcing until you have that relationship built with the family. So that rapport needs to be there and present as you move forward. So this will be an opportunity that you engage in a little bit further down the road in your therapeutic relationship, or in your community-based programming. You would want to incorporate these items as your groups have got to know each other a little bit better, and have that established safety within the group. So grounding really means allowing the patient, family, or individuals to stay mindful of the present and speak their truth and express their emotions without becoming so overwhelmed, or having such an acute reaction that it creates an opportunity where they may relive their trauma or have flashbacks. So it's about staying mindful and in the present and being able to speak their truth. And there, that is a critically important concept that you would have to work on incrementally, telling your story, talking about the songs in your life and the songs in your head that inform your story and that are negative, and that you might need to eject some of those tapes. I'm dating myself, or CDs, or playlists, if you will, so that you can talk about the emotions and feelings without all of the negative background noise. Resourcing really means becoming aware of the support systems and strengths available. And so you would really want to develop this and talk about this in groups or with individuals, in developing a list of skills and abilities, the ways they've been courageous and persistent, or ways that they self-soothe. And it's okay in the beginning to make a list of self-soothing that might be ineffective, whether that's substance abuse or alcohol or gambling. Really looking at being honest about some of those self-soothing techniques, and then actually building upon those. How can you make those more effective? If there are key times of the day where you feel like you need to drink, at those key times, what other things could we do? And so again, meeting families where they are, you'd happily have a list of any techniques of courage or persistence or self-soothing. Then once that resource list is built, you can include new or even healthier ways to calm and soothe those strong emotions. And you'll see under more resources, I have some examples and additional handouts you can pull to address these types of things with more activities. And then making sure that in addition to the resources that you have within yourself, you're reaching out to people you trust and including those trusted people on the list. Maybe even calling out what those people in your life provide to you. Is it a deep sense of comfort, or belongingness, a lack of judgment, and actually making a plan for when some of your strong feelings come up. Who in particular should you reach out to when you're feeling anxious or depressed or unmotivated? Um, I'm sure we all can think of people in our lives who are great at motivating you or holding you accountable or giving you the kick you need sometimes. Those may not be the people that you want to call when you're feeling um, judged or you're feeling discriminated against. You may want to call upon those friends and family members that really create that warm, soothing environment for you at that time. So, really thinking specifically about people you trust and those supportive caregivers in your life. And then also calling upon the domains of wellness. So, again, how being out in nature or using mindfulness can build your resilience and support your strengths, as well as the other five domains of wellness. So I just want to provide some examples on how you can engage with families in identifying their strengths. So you can see on the left, this is a handout from Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Plus that is really geared towards maybe adolescents or younger kids. So the ABCDs of my strengths. Um, um, five strengths that I already have, which strengths help me deal with my trauma, new strengths I have because of that trauma. So, really reframing that. And how do I feel about these strengths? This is just a first step, maybe, in strengths based therapy or strengths exploration. Then there's the I have, I am, I can framework, which is wonderful for really taking a next step in a discovery of strengths. And so, thinking about I have and writing out people who support me and how I might use that factor this week or in the coming week. Thinking about I am. So, what are my strengths and my feelings? And what are the things that I think and what I believe? And those can be both positive and negative. And so in the next box, you would use the I am to transition into an active response to your feelings and beliefs and saying, what are skills I can use to cope or that I will use in the coming weeks to cope when I'm feeling certain things. One of my favorite strengths based activity is using the Stronger Me framework with patients and families. And you'll see as we go through this framework how this actively incorporates cognitive behavioral therapy concepts into strengths based work to launch sort of a further dive into this concept and activate goal setting. So, really moving patients along the Prochaska readiness to change model from pre contemplation and contemplation to activation. And that's really done largely through goal setting, but I love the framework here. And so the acronym Stronger Me outlines some activities to use with patient families and even in programming. So again, using a strengths inventory or some of the lists that we just looked at to notice what strengths individuals have. If you're working with programming and you have activities you do throughout the day, just calling out strengths you see with the individuals you serve. Notice them and then encourage them or even articulate your thankfulness for those strengths, how those help other people that you're serving if you're in group settings. So if a child is really compassionate and kind and goes over and helps the individual that's fallen down in the kickball game or encourages them, that you say, you're a really great encourager. I sure am thankful for having you around because not everybody remembers to encourage one another, and you make everyone better with your presence here. Later in the day, you can reframe that and have that individual think about or rethink that skill and say, do you encourage yourself the way you encourage other individuals? I sure hope you do. Thinking about others and those acts of kindness that help to build a sense of community and belonging, and really kindness and noticing nice things really help us to be grounded in the present. And so thinking about those concepts within building strength and then moving towards setting goals, things I'm going to do this week when I'm feeling overwhelmed or stressed, or I get triggered with regard to my trauma. Again, as I mentioned already, expressing those nice things that you see, and rethinking skills. It is there twice because it is so important, especially when um, there are skills that we may have that we don't think to apply in all areas or settings of our lives. So having an outside person ask you to consider, have you ever thought about how great you are at organizing your toys or your books? And can you apply that into organizing your feelings into buckets where they might be truthful and real, and other buckets where they might be big feelings or not helpful feelings, so that you can really organize your thoughts about reactions in life. Again, tapping into the domains of wellness using the concept of mindfulness, and then thinking and really praising and reinforcing that this type of self-assessment, this type of thoughtfulness in activities and pursuing self care and mental health are excellent. These are things that not everybody is willing to do. So, really praising and reinforcing how difficult and important it is to pursue your own health and mental health through a strengths based perspective and through self care. Many of the resources that I've shared with you today are through the publication of the Public Health Agency and the Southeastern Education Board of Library and Library Board. You can find these and a worksheet called Bouncing Back at the website here, acert.biz. A lot of the resources are also provided to you today through the Fostering Resilience and Recovery program, Trauma Transformed, and I pulled a lot of this information from a wonderful journal article published through the International Journal of Social Work and Human Services. So I did want to share those items with you and leave some time for questions. So I'm going to ask Molly to help me with the chat. And also, if you would like to unmute yourself, you are welcome to ask questions at this time as well.
Thanks, Carissa, and thanks everyone who's put their names in the chat. That's really helpful to kind of see who's here. Looks like we have a good geographic representation, East and West Coast and Midwest. And we actually have a number of people from schools, which I think is wonderful. So, you know, if you have any questions, please let Carissa know, or myself. You can chat, or you can raise your hand and I can unmute you. And, you know, if you've used any of these tactics, anything that Carissa talked about today, if you've used these in your practice, we'd love to hear from you too. Just hearing from other people what their on the ground experience has been can be really helpful. So either questions or experience would be welcome.
Again, we will be sharing the slides with you. That was a great question. But absolutely, we'll be sharing the slides with you after the presentation today. So feel free to use those however you see fit.
Kathy, I see that you raised your hand. I'm just going to find you. There you go. You should be able to talk now. Oh, I lost you.
Oh, no, I'm here.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
Some of the buttons are different than normal, and I was testing out the raise hand button.
Oh, okay.
So I guess host control mute and unmute is the first time I've experienced that. So
Okay.
I see a great question by Rowena about the expanded ACEs. So it depends on the tool you're using, Rowena. The Pearls tool has, which is the Pediatric Experience and Related Life Events, which is available at ACEs Aware, has the 10 core ACEs on top, and then there are 7 additional adversities expressed on the bottom of the questionnaire that are related more towards community adversities, and have been, and that tool in particular has been validated through a partnership that we have with UCSF. And so we do recommend that you consider looking at 4 or more ACEs as a reasonable threshold for there being high risk for the development of toxic stress. An important thing to consider, and something that I probably didn't articulate well at the beginning of our discussion today, is that the Pearls tool, the ACE-Q tool, are not necessarily built to screen for adverse experiences. What they're intended for is to screen for the presence of toxic stress, which might be affecting a patient or individual's health and well-being. And so asking about the number of experiences that one has had in their lives is sort of just a jumping off point for the conversation you may need to have about how it's impacting their behavior or their health. And then moving quickly into how can you build resilience, or what strengths do you have, not necessarily diving into the individual experiences, but more so having patients and families or students understand the impact that that trauma has had on them and how to move forward. There's a great question about research regarding ACEs and parenting behaviors. Certainly, the as a parent, if you have experienced ACEs, you are more likely to be at risk for not having effective attachment with your child. But again, it has to do with individual experiences related to having supportive caregivers in your lives. If your experience as a parent is, I had really traumatic experiences, but I had those buffers in place, like a supportive caregiver or a mom or grandmother that cooked wonderfully nutritious meals, and we had that type of resilience building. And so my experiences, even though I had a really significant trauma, I have built resilience. And so in that instance, your parenting very well could be a further generational experience where you then are the supportive caregiver for a child who may have had their own individual traumatic experiences. And so your parenting can either be reactive positively or negatively. Again, that's why it's so critically important to use a strengths-based perspective, because you may find in the discovery of a discussion around trauma that the individual who has experienced it doesn't see that as necessarily a negative thing in their lives. So sometimes you have that opportunity to say, wow, you really did thrive and survive in this way. What are some other ways we can take that resilience you have and create supports around other goals that you'd like to pursue in your life? Maybe around exercise or better sleep hygiene, getting adequate sleep, or being able to use those strengths to cope with your own anxiety. So again, that's a great question, and there's also a great deal of research available regarding supportive caregivers and parenting and ACEs in the literature.
Hey, Carissa, I'm gonna break in really quick. I think Michelle's had her hand up for a while, so I'm gonna allow her to unmute, and then we can get into I think there's a couple questions about positive child experiences and resilience. So Michelle, if you're still there, I'm gonna get you to unmute right now.
Okay, my hand was raised for so long, not because I have a burning question. It's mostly because I didn't know what the protocol was with the mute or unmute. But just a comment as a school psychologist in the Philadelphia Public Schools. I've been trying to incorporate an understanding of adverse childhood events into my practice for many years now. And one of the things that I have learned is that in circumstances where you're living in, we have neighborhoods that are just profoundly impacted by poverty and violence. Sometimes it doesn't even make sense for us to screen for adverse childhood events because we can just assume based on the what the demographic information, we can pull all kinds of information about what the neighborhoods are struggling with. We know that folks are struggling. So if we can just know that there's a high level of stress and wrap them with supports and services, that's been helpful. So like we have had an ACEs Aware Week here at the elementary school to help parents and families understand what ACEs are and how they impact themselves as adults and also their parenting. And we also try to talk about what adverse childhood events people have been experiencing or have experienced, as well as their kids as it relates to special education identification, which has been really helpful also. So I think that the more that you can come at this from all directions, but also we're afforded in schools a consistency where we can take those sorts of strength-based approaches and incorporate them every single day. So for example, teaching kids how to develop skills that would, put them on the path of greater self-efficacy. Like next year, we're hoping to do a whoop, there it is, do Angela Duckworth's, do that whoop kind of strategy so that kids have kind of clear ways to put themselves on a path to success. So if they have small goals, they can learn how to achieve them, not just telling them that they can do a thing, but showing them how to do it as well. So that's where we're at. So yeah, that's it. So it wasn't burning, it's more of a comment. I'm sorry it looked that way.
No, we're so glad you shared. Thank you so much, Michelle. I think you're absolutely right. It depends on your setting. If you are working with a population that you do know has already, they are actively experiencing many adversities, you don't need to assess for that necessarily. But then just build the concepts of strengths-based therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, trauma-informed care into your programming. You're absolutely right. I think that's a wonderful concept, and I really I encourage you to keep that up. It sounds like wonderful activities you're working on there, Michelle. I have a really good question about pairing assessment of positive childhood experiences. I think that's a wonderful approach. And you can do that either through a standardized tool, a resilience tool, or through talking about strengths and previous experiences. And so there are many ways to get at that. I think that's always critically important after you have some insight into the impact of the trauma, that you quickly move into resilience. Well, not too quickly, but you also always incorporate the either strengths or resilience within that individual's life or the resources they have available to them, with every discussion about the trauma, so that you continuously balance events that have happened with hope and healing. And I do think that's really important. Even just pointing out a positive observation at the end of each session, or throughout sessions, or any of the work that you're doing with individuals. There are a couple of validated resilience tools out there. Thank you for your question, Rowena. We are agnostic about resilience tools, but we do have a list of them, and we can send that out with the recording and the slides today. Any other questions or thoughts before we wrap up today?
It looks like there's a question about suggestions to how a provider might phrase or ask patient strength-based questions, and the best way to start that conversation.
Sure. That is a great question. I think that saying, just directly saying, what is one thing that you feel like you're really good at? And then digging a little deeper. So if somebody says, I'm a really good cook, saying, how do you feel like that could help you in coping and having a healthy lifestyle, or dealing with the stresses of the day? Do you find cooking relaxing? Do you like to incorporate healthy vegetables? Really asking them, say someone says, I love to cook, and they know that they also need to work on their glucose levels, or stabilizing their glucose levels, or maybe they want to work on losing some weight. So really building upon the strength. They're a great cook. Have you considered making some of your favorite dishes healthier, or incorporating ways, investigating ways that you can make them more carbohydrate efficient? So I think the direct question is one of the best ones. Another way to get at that is to say, what do other people say that you're really good at? You will have to be careful with that line of questioning. Make sure that they have a supportive caregiver or supportive friends and family in their life before you approach that way, because you don't want to get the answer, I don't have anyone in my life that tells me anything that I'm good at. And so again, as you get to know your patients, you can say something like, I think that you're probably very good at crafts during the holidays. Is that true? Do you like doing that? So again, doing that sort of reflection, I think I've seen this in you. Is that accurate? Builds rapport, makes the patients feel like you're observant and listening to them. And if you didn't get that right, it gives them an opportunity to reflect what they think they're good at, and then for you to snag that and build upon it.
Great. I think that is the rest of the questions, unless I have anyone else. I don't see anyone with a raised hand. All right. Well, as Carissa mentioned, we'll be sending out the recording and the slides of this presentation within the next week. So look out into your email for that. And I think with that, we can probably conclude.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for coming, and hopefully see you soon.